So I'm planing my well board. This is the top surface, the underside doesn't really need to be planed unless you want to. So I'm going tangentially across here and I'm really leveling this surface first, and it's easier to go this direction just to straighten up the surface, just like we did for the bench tops. And then I'm going to throw my plane this way along the length, all the way across. What I do when I'm coming to the end of a stroke is I lift up the heel of my plane so it feathers in. Then when I come on that next section, I drop my plane on so I don't have any variance in the level that is visible. And all I need to do then is fit the wellboard into the opening. I've not squared this end, as you can see. I'm going to drop it in and then I'm going to mark it across from the two halves. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the bulk of the bench again to give me a place to set my board. I've got one at the other end. So I'm going to drop this over the end. This just to check my width here. Line it up with the well. I've already ripped this down, so I'm almost in. I just need a little hair off this end. Check the other end, and make sure that this end has enough width. And again, I'm just over from ripping it, so I'm going to plane this edge here. But what I'm also going to do, instead of planing it dead square, I'm going to plane a leading edge in it, because I want the wellboard to be as tight as possible. Once it's wedged between these two areas here, this mass, and these are bolted down, this is not going to expand, it's not going to shift. And that will hold it while I plane this edge. So I'm going to just camp my plane over to one side a little bit, just to give a leading edge in, because I was fairly close. And as I back along here, I'm putting that leading edge on. Now if you have a gap, it really doesn't matter too much, because we're going to also put a quadrant in here, so if there's any shrinkage, there won't be any gap between the two main bench tops and the wellboard. So we will be putting an addition in there, so it doesn't technically have to be a tight fit. Make sure you're taking an even amount off. Check yourself as you go. Alright, now we need to drop it in, see if it'll fit, cut it to length and cut the dados on it. Like it's going to fit. So I'm leaving it over on either end just so I can mark it and cut it to length as it's ready. That's going to go. I'm going to take another shaving off here, I think. Here I can feel it's loose, but this end is a little bit tight. Not too tight though. Bit like a cork in a bottle, maybe too much leading in. I think that will work. Police siren out there somewhere. See what we got now. Looks good. There we go. So all I have to do now is mark my length, cut it square, but also I want to do those recesses I told you about underneath. You know, I want to recess it a little bit deeper because I have an inch here, and if I recess the underside, you know, 3/8, half an inch or so, that will give me an extra depth, and that's what I need to make sure it clears my hammers and my chisels, squares and things like that. So let's do that. So I've got my wellboard fitted. Now I need to cut it to length, and what I know my bench is square because I put the straight edge along here making sure it was. So now to make sure the wellboard is dead to length, take a straight edge across here and make a knife wall in here. I've already marked the other end. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the bench again to my advantage. I'm going to bump this through to that end a little bit, and emphasize my knife wall here just a little bit, just for the saw to travel along. I call this a knife wall. I don't remember anybody ever calling it that. It just seemed to say exactly what I wanted it to be. It's really a wall, a definitive boundary for subsequent cuts with saws and planes and so on. So now this bench feels so high, I've got it. I'm not worried about the underside on this cut. And normally I would be, I'd put my knife wall all around, but I'm going to be feathering the underside to make it line up with this edge afterwards. So great, now I bump this back. Well, I'm just playing it while I've got it here. This way. And then bump it back. And now I'll cut the other end. Okay, I've got my wellboard cut to length, I've got it planed, it's ready to put the housing dado over the bearing. So on the underside here, inside, I'm going to run my knife and do the same on this side, right on the bearer, like that. That's going to mark the exact position. I already marked the other end ready. So I just need to lift this out. I'm going to run a marking gauge on here to get my depth, and then we'll cut the dado. I'm clamping my wellboard on here just so it doesn't move. This is a very solid position now. So I've got my knife lines here, so I can deepen these now, like this and like this. I've got to get the depth here. Now I've set my poor man's router here. Nobody can see here, so I don't have to worry about my stop positions. So I can use that as a pristine way of marking, or I could set the depth with this, but because this is going to be my finished depth, I know I'm exact with that. So just get that knife wall a bit more definitive, like this. And there's a couple of ways you can do this now. You could, and underneath here I've got a knot there. It really wouldn't matter if this is a little off because of the knot. It's not going to be seen. Perpendicular cut. I'm going right into this knot here. There. Those knots on spruce are remarkably hard. They're harder than any other wood, almost, I think. Okay, I'm going to show you something now. What we can do with this is we can take the saw and we can run the saw right into that. go down to our depth line, and I like to take some of this bulk out of the way. Or especially around that knotty area. This is the pith, this is the very centre of the tree here. You always get a little wild grain around there. Here I'm going right into that knot with sawing through it. I don't have to worry about it breaking out on the top. That's just in case somebody crawls underneath my bench to assess the quality of my work. So I can come all the way across here, but I'm going to come this way, bevel down again. If I'm working overhand like this, I go bevel down. If I'm working forehand this way, I go directly in. So flick these out of the way. That exposes my knife wall. And then direct hit there. This is a great chisel hammer. This costs about £3 here in the UK. It's a panel beating hammer. Doesn't look very nice, but boy, it really delivers that centre of percussion exactly where I need it, right in the middle. I doubt whether you'll find a better chisel hammer than that. Wonderful. So back to my saw again. Here, this is a different technique here. If the bench is solid enough, you can pop across like this. I love that double-handed method. And I'm going to chisel in here from this edge here. Start off a 1/16 above, just take off some of that excess, but also you're trying to look at how the grain is going to run. Is it going to be for you or is it going to be against you? That's great. So take out some of the start wood there. Then I'll show you. See, there's the pith. That's where the awkward grain is on any project, especially on furniture when you're getting hardwoods. But here I've got this double-handed stabbing again. Nice and clean. I'm still aiming upwards here. This is a technique here, see that? So I've got a very nice level surface. I'm only going to the bolster, that stops me. So people think that you're supposed to do the whole dado with the bevel down. That's not really true. You have much better control this way, but when you get part way, this is why I think people think you do the whole. It's when you get there and you can't get it with the bevel up. So you can remove your waste this way. Be conscious of the depth of your saw cut, because if you weren't deep enough, then you can split this top wood out. Now I'm not going to go all the way across. I'm going to come in from this side. Again, it wouldn't really matter, but I've learned it's not what you make, it's how you make it that matters. And for the sake of the quality of your work is determined by how you work and what standards you set for yourself. So I'm going to come in here, a little bit here, just to get this down. Not quite deep enough there, so that's my saw cut. Same here. Now I'm going to go with my router. If you have a number 71 Stanley router, that will do the job on these narrow ones. Just this is to make sure you have everything you need. I'm avoiding that knot there. You can tell there's a knotty area there. I'm just going to get that with my chisel. That's my dado done, really. Now we'll do the same to the other end. Just cleaning up the wall where my saw kerf was on that one. So that's my housing dado ready to go. I've got one more to do and then we'll drop it in and we'll screw this from the underside, and that's how you fit your well. I'm just going to use my poor man's router to mark this along here. You could use a regular router and you can use a marking gauge. You can use whichever you have close to hand. I'm just showing you the versatility of using hand tools. A simple chamfer on this under edge here. You can set your plane quite coarse to start with. Down to that line. And that's it. So when I flip this over, I can cinch this down with a couple of screws. While I've got this open, I'll drill a couple of holes in here. Aim at this end. I'm not going to glue it, I'm just going to rely on this housing dado. You can see why typically you would maybe glue it, even though this is 9.5, 10 inches wide. You could still glue it. Sometimes wood does not shrink because it's already acclimated to the environment that you're in, and it may just stay exactly the same for 20, 30 years. Rubber side won't damage the wood, remember. Make sure this end's down. And just a couple of screws through those holes underneath now. And that'll hold that wellboard well enough. Just make your screws, make sure your screws aren't coming through the top. I'll cinch the other end and we've got it.